Date. Joining me today is my dear friend, Chris Mahan. As you've seen him on the podcast here in the last little bit and on the YouTube videos, for those of you who didn't know, check out YouTube, financiallysimple.com/YouTube. Chris has been on there on the show now, man. What, 5, 6, 7 times? I don't even know anymore, brother. How long have you been on how many times have you been on the show with us?
Yeah, we'll go with 5.
We'll go with 5. Okay. All right. 5 times on the show. And as we're going through this particular crisis is the term that's used, Chris, you and I have been trying to help our business owners navigate this small business association loans. Is that a fair way to describe what you and I've been trying to deal with?
Yeah, navigating the SBA loans and all the blogs and posts and tweets and articles that come out that, that everybody's trying to get information out there. And then we get to hopefully clarify some of those, informational pieces and some non-informational pieces.
Because we're live on the air, I've actually got my system up and running. If you have any questions as you're watching this, feel free to put in a comment. Then one of our team members, Mr. John, is following us at this point, and he will Slack me the message. So hopefully Chris and I can answer that as we're live on the air here. So just as a backdrop again, Chris Mahan's joining us from Mahan and Associates. You obviously know who I am. I am the one, the only Justin Gibbard. I don't think, actually, there is another Justin Gibbard out there, Chris.
The one, the only.
Yeah, the one, the only. But Mahan and Associates, nonetheless, friends, they're a partner of ours. I'd say partner. We do a lot of business together, working with our clients jointly to try to, as I say, we like to try to help our clients double their net worth every, 3-5 years or so is what we shoot for. Mm-hmm. And we do that through a lot of different methods. So with that being said, Chris, we're dealing with the Wild West. That's the terms you and I have been kind of saying behind the scenes.
Yep.
I got to tell you, it looks like I got approved on the 7A loan. Mm-hmm. And it was a little different. So let me tell you my story, and let me see if my story matches what you've seen thus far. Okay.
Okay.
I reached out to my banker, as everybody did. He's a dear friend of mine. He said, Justin, send me this, that, and the other. So I started sending him information, everything from P&Ls, balance sheets, tax returns, payroll statements. I'd send everything in, try to calculate it all out so the banker underwriters could figure out what they were looking at. And lo and behold, they didn't understand it. So I had to give a little bit more clarity, a little bit more information. They didn't understand that. I had to give some more information. And our bankers, I think the word frustrated is the word I'd like to use, Chris. They were extremely frustrated on the fact that the Small Business Association was not giving clear guidance. In fact, even over the weekend, they were getting guidance, which totally changed the calculation again. So long story short, we put in a particular number for our company. We were rejected on that number. Basically said, no, they can't confirm the calculation. And they reduced the number down. And I was like, this isn't how the law is written. So it's been a whirlwind.
Yeah.
Have you had anybody at this point in your world get approved for the loan?
I have not. I have not seen any funds come through yet. Now, again, you get an approval number once you get the 7A application in, but I haven't seen any monies transferred yet. And again, and it's like you said, it's the Wild West, man. And I'd put this into people's perspective. Let's say that, if we're going to use a dental office or a medical office, if you're used to seeing, 30 patients a day or 120 patients a week, just imagine getting a mandate that you could see 10,000 patients a week. That's how much it's grown, extrapolated from what the SBA normally underwrites and facilitates money to what, got pushed through and green lighted last week, again, went live on Friday. And I think a lot more clarity is coming down the pipe.
Some of the things I've heard that I personally have experienced, and actually had a couple of different bankers send me screenshots of what they were looking at with the SBA. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to clarify some points, which candidly, even as Friday, was very confusing. So here's something that I thought was interesting. Inside the law, it actually says that you can, as a business owner, you can calculate your 1099 employees into the calculation. And we were told that as late as last Friday that, yes, you can calculate. That's coming from multiple, and I'm talking about dozens of bankers whom I have the opportunity to speak with. I know you do as well, Chris. And then all of a sudden, over the weekend, the SBA comes back and removes that calculation. And what they said is, from our understanding, is that the rules were not very clear. et cetera, et cetera. But what I'm hearing from banks is some banks are allowing the 1099 calculation to stay in the loan document, and others are not.
Mhm.
Have you heard anything from the bankers as it relates to these 1099 employees with us business owners who have W-2 employees being able to count 1099 income into the loans?
Well, two things is that I've noticed that most all the banks, as recently as today, have changed their calculation pro forma spreadsheets to pull 1099 independent contractors off. Um, Now, again, if you're self-employed and have W-2s, you can put your money, your income subject to SE tax, right? So it's not your distributions, it's not your draw, it's what's subject to self-employment up to $100,000. You can do that right now with your employees, right? But if you're an independent contractor or a self-employed individual that doesn't have any employees, you can't file for your PPP loan until the 10th. And I think the philosophy behind that was to let the people with employees get in first, and then the self-employed no employees come in second.
Yeah, I'm hearing the same thing. Again, folks, what Chris is saying is those of you who are maybe do not have any W-2 employees that are solopreneurs or solo contractors and solely.
Specialist or some of those guys.
Yeah. I mean, well, we've got a lot of dentists, by the way, that have a W-2 income. And I've got a couple of clients that have W-2 income, Chris, that are making like 60 grand a year, but then the rest of their income's on the 1099 side.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And so they're going to be able to qualify, but I've heard the same date, and now it's the 10th of April. That's the date you're hearing as well in that particular.
Exactly.
Yeah. One of the other things that came about, which I thought was interesting, is when does the loan forgiveness start? So as late as Friday, I had no less than a couple dozen bankers all saying different things. And then one of my bankers actually took a photo shot of the SBA approval. He had redacted the confidential information. They said, hey, just for your information, check this out. And inside there, the SBA says approved and approved and funded on the exact same day.
Mhm.
So the website itself that the bankers are reading through their particular portal is telling us that whenever that loan is approved by the SBA, that is the triggering date of the actual 8-week forgiveness. Are you hearing about the same thing there on that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I've been hearing, and I've seen some, other, thought leadership from firms and professionals that I respect that have said that some banks will defer funding because you got two terms here that I think is important. You got origination date and you got funding date, right? And I've seen some things out there saying that some banks have agreed to defer funding. I think and they reference specifically the SBA final interpretation regs that came out on Thursday. And I read all 31 pages of that I did not see anything about deferment options on there. On the new application, there's not anything I saw about deferment options. So that would have to be on a lender by lender case specific. But back to exactly what you said, Justin, if we have two things that are up there right now, we got origination date or whenever the SBA approves funding. If that starts the clock, it doesn't matter when they receive the funds from their bank or the administrator of the loan, right? Yep. And I would have to say for my clients, until we get further guidance, always assume on the worst side for you, right?
Yeah. So Chris, what I actually personally experienced through this process is I submitted all my paperwork on Friday, and that's so just like everybody else, they actually submitted Thursday night and got to the banker. And on Friday, they started processing loans. And by lunchtime, by the way, I saw over, I think it was 800,000 loans. I think it was that was approved by lunchtime on Friday based on the TV reports. But what they did is that in my particular bank, they have an internal operations, I guess, a checks and balance system to make sure that whenever you make an application, there's another compartment within the bank is reviewing that application and giving the green light. And then my understanding from my personal banker is once the green light is given within that particular bank or that particular location, then they submit it to the SBA, and it's pretty much a stamp at that point, a rubber stamp at that point. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that if I apply today on whatever, Monday the 6th, and the bank were to rubber stamp or to give me the approval based on my numbers and based on their research of how they're interpreting this particular crazy loan, this bill here, are you saying that the bank themselves could possibly sit on that for a period of time until we're ready? Or are you saying that there's an issue with the actual application date? I just want to be crystal clear on what you're saying there.
Yeah, I think that again, if I had to, until I got further guidance, I would wait for the application because again, as they start expediting these loans, which a lot of smaller banks are really pushing through too, um, I think that that's the day that you have to assume you're on the clock until further guidance. One of the first things that that I've been recommending is something for consideration. Right? Is you have 8 weeks to use the money, whether it's funded or origination date, right? We've got 4 weeks that I think pretty much everybody knows we're down in April, right? So if best case scenario, we come back on May 4th, that would be the day you'd want to have your loan underwritten because that's still within that 630, that June 30 timeline to use the money for the 8 weeks,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so I think that, right now, unless your office is still open, if you're still open, I would go ahead and get the money today. I get your applications in today. We have a lot of medical clients that are still opening, seeing patients, et cetera. However, if your office is shut down, a lot of dental, a lot of opto, a lot of chiro, then if you're shut down, then I would recommend pausing and waiting for further regulation. With the asterisk, I think the reason why everybody was so gung ho about going in on Friday is because it says this is a first come, first serve, and we've already got the loans, the money's appropriated from Congress that we have. That's the thing that you have to watch. When you see Mnuchin, Trump, Rubio, they all saying they're going to get more funding to make sure everybody's taken care of. I don't see them leaving a half or even a 1/4% of small businesses out there outside the window looking in going, oh my goodness, I didn't go get this the day they gave it. Right.
Yeah.
But I can't say that that's, not going to happen either. But again, so I think that if you're closed, you want to time that origination as close as you can with opening back up, because that's what it's there for, is to support us small businesses as we get going back up, so we can bring in all of our staff, full employment, keep them on a full employment while we get through the the next 4, 6, 8 weeks after we get COVID-19 under control.
Chris, so let's assume for our conversation here just for a second that we are dealing with a lot of these businesses which are not at this point visiting with clients, patients, etc. What in your advice are you telling your clients that they can start pulling, start preparing, start speaking with their advisors about as far as getting data to help fill out the application?
Oh, that's a great question. Get everything teed up. Everything teed up for your EIDL loans, your economic injury disaster loans, and get everything teed up for your PPP, your Paycheck Protection Program loans. I think there was a little bit of a fire set over some emails that went out nationwide regarding concern that due to the SBA final interpretations that came out last Thursday, it mentioned if you received EIDL monies, you still qualify for PPP if you received your funds by 4/3. Here's the one thing it doesn't say anywhere in there. If you have an application, you don't.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that you and I have seen enough, not enough research that it specifically states in the legislation and all the summaries that those two loans are for two very different things. Right. PPP is employees' paycheck, rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. The EIDL, economic injury disaster loans, is for everything other. Yeah. Right. And it said, and I think there's more clarification coming down that says you can't spend it on both. But back to your original question. Yeah, get everything lined up. Everything lined up. I'm talking about 2019, even tax returns. I've got a lot of our clientele file extensions and they get us all the stuff on, September 15th, October 1st, and we file it by October 15th. I'm seeing a floodgate of clients getting their personal information in because they want to have those personal and business returns done. Because when it comes down to underwriting, you and I both know they love our interim financials and our, but they want the returns that tie down to the 4506Ts that they have that's filed with the Internal Revenue Service, U.S. Treasury. So they know they're covered. So I'm like, get your returns done if you can, get all your financials together, go through and get with your advisor as to what to include on the loan, right? One of the things there's not a lot of clarification on, Justin, is owner's pension contributions.
Yep.
Right. I've seen some that have gone in and said, oh my gosh, I have a 401k and I can put that amount and divide it by 12 and include it in there. I have my cash balance or DB plan. That's a lot of money. And right now it doesn't clarify anywhere that I've seen that you can't use it, but I think there'll be further guidance as to how to use it. Right.
Yeah. So Chris, what I've seen personally is working with a number of clients over this last little bit is exactly that. So let me kind of walk through my mind and see if I'm on the same page with you, just in a very simple format. So obviously if we have tax returns, we want those. if we have profit and loss. So some banks are requesting profit and loss statements for 2019. Some banks are requesting balance sheets as of 12/31/19. Some banks want those two. In addition, they want a trailing 12 profit and loss statement or financial statement. They want a current P&L, and they're using those to calculate owner draws. They're using those to calculate to see if there's any ramp up in payroll. They're looking for W-3s. They're looking for 1099s. They're looking for, some banks, I had one client, they had to track back all the various insurances and actually provide that particular bank with the group health insurance statements to validate the insurance amount that was recorded on the profit and loss. That includes disability statements. We have one client who has a group sponsored HSA plan. And so because it's group sponsored, that contribution to the participants of that plan, including the owner, is included was included in the calculation by that particular bank. Where it gets kind of fuzzy is this retirement plan, man. So you and I both know, this is what I was arguing with the banker this morning about, is it wasn't my banker, it was a banker who with a client is this. Whenever you're dealing with a cash balance plan, there's an actuarial calculation, folks, that takes place. It takes place after 12/31, and you have to have a third-party administrator, and you have to have an actuator do some calculations there. But Chris, you and I both know the CARES Act allowed us to push the funding of this cash balance plans and many retirement plans all the way to the end of the year, which goes to my question that I was asking the banker. That I'm sorry I get worked up. This just infuriates me of how just illogical some of these guidelines are. Is you want me to file a tax return for my company when I haven't even funded the cash balance plan or the profit sharing or completely done the justifications on the safe harbor, the 401k. You could do the same thing with a SEP or a solo K, folks. I haven't even calculated that, and you want me to file a tax return. I can't file the tax return because I don't have the calculation. I can't fund the qualified plans because I don't have the money because I'm broke now for the last 8 weeks. It's kind of like the chicken and egg scenario over and over and over again. Do you feel my frustration, brother?
Oh yeah. And I think that's what many of the listeners and a lot of our, clients and friends have been experiencing is, and again, I can't, there's not a blame to be assigned anywhere, right? Again, you got the federal government that have moved as fast as you could ever expect them to move with $2.2 trillion bills, right? And all these billions are coming through SBA. You got banks that are doing their best to make sure, but also to make sure that they don't get hung out there holding the bag in what's supposed to be free money, 100% guaranteed. I think the banks have they're shell shocked a little bit from the regulations that came on them from 2007, 2008, right or wrong. So they're making sure that they're walking slow to make sure they do this perfectly, right? Because they don't want to get held out there. I would say I would not recommend ever filing a tax return without having the pension funded, because that's something that, it's pretty clear in IRS guidelines and regulations. And I think with the PPP loan, you can do it without a tax return. You can do it with they're really cared about the employee benefits. And, that's funny that you mentioned, Justin. It says in the actual new SBA loan application for 7B, it says, at first, it starts salaries and wages for the preceding 12 months. And then you go down to another section that says for the prior calendar year. And you're like, which one do I do? Right. But I think they're really going to be hanging their hat on 2019 W-3 and W-2 activity if you were in business. If you weren't in business until this year, then you can utilize January 1st to February 15th to ascertain that monthly average. And man, one of the things also that came out very early with all this is just do the absolute best you can do. Right. And be as accurate as you can be. And a lot of this, we'll have to work through together.
One last point I'll give you, Chris, on this particular 7A is that, and I've had this happen now with a couple of different banks, exactly what you just said, do the best you can do. You're working with your planners, you're working with your tax advisors, your attorneys in some cases, depending on what you're dealing with. And ultimately your banker or your banking team is going to hold the gate door to open this up for the SBA. So they're doing the best they can. Trust me, if you have a great relationship, as so many business owners do with their bankers, my dearest friend, one of my dearest friends in the world is a banker. I've known him since I was 6 years old. I've never in my life seen my friend Bryce get stressed, and a cool cucumber just is stressed right now. And so I know that if my buddy gets stressed, the amount of stress the bankers are dealing with, one of the things that I saw is this. Going to that fact that the bankers know you're trying to do the best they can, especially if you know them and they know you. There's actually a couple of the banks have issued this where you're going to just basically sign an affidavit, basically saying, I've done the best I can. the rules are changing frequently. This is how the best I calculated it. And the way I was talking with the banker on that, I said, well, that actually makes a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, it's still a loan. It's still a loan. Now, it's not a high interest rate loan, but it's still a loan. So if you're a little lower or a little higher in that calculation, and you're not able to apply it to the forgiveness thing exactly the way that everybody's trying to work it out, then you end up having a loan in place that's 2 years at roughly 1% interest. Is that the same thing you're kind of telling clients?
Yes. Hold on a second.
You're fine.
Sorry about that.
You're fine.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling my clients is, if you rush into this and you jeopardize your forgiveness period, then you could be jeopardizing what the beauty of this whole loan is, which is the forgiveness.
Right.
It is the forgiveness attribute of this loan. Otherwise, it's just another loan. It's just another note to add to your books, and it's a 2-year note. So again, if you go out there and get a lot of money and you don't play the forgiveness component or strategy correctly, then you will definitely be risking the benefit that's built for it, right?
So let's change gears. You're busy like I am. Let's get off this thing here. The 7B. I heard some interesting news. The $10,000 grant that they originally said, hey, business owners are going to get an instant $10,000 grant. I've seen a huge walk back on that, Chris. Basically, now they're saying, with additional guidance over the weekend, that it's depending on employee size. And I can't get any clarity on this. What I'm hearing is, small businesses are up to 500 employees. So and now your small business only has 2 or 3, I don't know how they're calculating that $10,000 loan. The second thing I'm hearing is that they originally came out and said, hey, we'll give you the money in 3 to 5 business days. I just don't think they have the bandwidth in the SBA to fund all the different applications they're receiving at this particular point. And to my knowledge, I don't know a lot of people who've applied for the 7B $10,000 grant. I'm not aware of one person to date that has received the 10,000. So let me ask you 2 questions. Number one, do you know anybody's received the 10,000? Number 2, do you have any idea on how they're calculating how that grant number is, how they're calculating the grant number?
One, no, I do not have anybody that's actually received the funding, including myself. Right.
Yeah.
And it's ironic that they're tying it to employee count or size when that money is supposed to be used for everything else.
Yeah.
Right.
I
know. But I do echo your sentiments that it's about bandwidth and clarification. And then in regards to how they're calculating it based on number of employees or size, I do not know yet. Those are things that'll be coming out. I know that Marco Rubio tweeted over the weekend, a lot of guidance will be coming out early this week. Today and tomorrow, you'll see a lot more guidance. In addition to, you'll probably see a lot more, assumptions that may or may not be accurate. So that's what we all have to watch and make sure that we don't get, too anxious or too energized when you see something, and just kind of sit back and do your due diligence. Let us do our due diligence to get out here to factor in what we're seeing as true and accurate.
Yeah, it's the Wild West, guys. So look, Chris, Brennan, I appreciate you jumping on with me for a few minutes here. I always love your wisdom. Always love your input. You're on the ground, boots on the ground right now, myself included. We got the 2 teams here. So look, on behalf of Heritage Investors, Financially Simple, and Mahan Associates, friends, if you have questions, reach out to either Chris or I. We have been dealing with this. We have a flood of bankers behind us that are providing us information, try to keep us in the loop. I've even had some information directly from the SBA National and a couple of phone calls that I've been able to been invited to sit on. So look, this is the Wild West. Let's just keep on rolling through it. Hey, brother, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it, Chris.
Thanks, Justin. Y'all have a good one.
See you.